Once upon a time, in the far eastern part of Nigeria, there lived a couple named Okonkwo and Mesoma. They both had two beautiful children, a boy and a girl. Okonkwo was a very wealthy man who had so many properties and a vast number of businesses. He was known far and wide by many people. Despite all his possessions, he still remained a humble man. Okonkwo had two brothers, Okudili and Ebuka. They always envied him because of how wealthy he was. He had set up businesses for his brothers and made sure they were all established, yet they were not satisfied. They always complained of wanting more. As a result of their greed, they took out their anger and frustration on Mesoma. They were always so harsh towards her and her children and treated them in disdain. Okonkwo, being a strict and disciplined man, cautioned them sternly never to harass his wife or children again, else they would live to regret it, so they all respected themselves. But whenever Okonkwo was out on one of his business trips, they would unleash their wrath on Mesoma again. Mesoma always shielded her children from the wickedness of their uncles and kept swallowing all the mistreatment she got from them, till she was no longer able to take it. She knew that they only attacked her when her husband was away, but when he came back from his business, they would start pretending to be changed. So she made up her mind that when her husband got back from his business trip, she would tell him all that had been going on so he could provide a solution. So she eagerly waited for him outside the house, and on sighting his car, she smiled and couldn't wait to welcome him back. His car came to a stop, and a man who was not her husband came out of the car and broke the news about her husband's death to her. Mesoma couldn't believe her ears. The man said that Okonkwo was involved in an accident, and they immediately rushed him to the hospital, but on getting there, they declared him dead. Mesoma screamed in agony. Her children and all the maids ran out to see what was wrong. She wept bitterly. This was the worst day of her life. The news of the death of the once great man Okonkwo spread like wildfire across the village. And before evening, his compound was full of people coming to pay the grieving family a condolence visit. Okonkwo was of great positive influence in the entire village. He had in one way touched the lives of all the villagers, and his death left them in a big shock. A few weeks after the condolence visit had reduced, Okonkwo's brothers demanded that Okonkwo's properties and businesses will be managed by them. Mesoma was ordered to take her children away with her from their brother's house. They referred to her and her children as visitors, and the person who brought them in was dead, so they were no longer welcome. They volunteered to pay her peanuts to start her life somewhere else, but she resisted. They accused her of even killing her husband. She told them that this was her husband's house and she was not going to go anywhere. She stormed out of the house to go visit her friend, Ego. Ego was a single lady, but she became good friends with Mesoma since she got married to Okonkwo. Ego was the only friend Mesoma had, and she was the one she vented to when she had any problem. Mesoma would always run to her for comfort, and Ego would always welcome her with open arms. Mesoma told her friend that she and her children were in danger. Ego tried consoling her and advised that she should give up the properties to her in-laws and let them do what they wanted with it, because they seemed to be dangerous and she didn't want her friend to get harmed in the process. But Mesoma was relentless and stood her ground. She went back home and spent most of her time with her children so they won't feel the impact of their father's absence. The following week, the brothers came to the house and seized all Okonkwo's car keys and documents. They were determined to throw Mesoma out of the house, but she fought against them. So they left angrily with all the cars and documents they could lay their hands on. They also took over his businesses and prevented her from coming close to any of his business place. She was left alone to fend for herself and children with no money. Ego came that afternoon to visit Mesoma as usual. Mesoma was so devastated as she narrated her ordeal with her brother-in-laws. But she carefully whispered to her friend Ego, "My in-laws think they have won, but they don't know that my husband left some secret properties for me and my children." Ego's eyes widened in surprise at the revelation. Okonkwo, being a wise man, knew that there could be a turn of events and the unexpected could happen. So in order to make sure that his wife and children's future are secured, he kept aside some properties that only his wife knew about. He made sure that none of his brothers or even friends knew about it. Mesoma told her all about the property and Ego was happy for her friend. At least she had somewhere to fall back to. A few days later, Mesoma went to the property her husband had secretly left behind so she could establish it as she had nothing left to her name. On getting there, she saw that her husband's brother, Okudili, was already present at the site with Ego. She was dumbfounded. "Ego, what are you doing here with this man?" she asked. Mesoma trusted her friend Ego so much, but little did she know that Ego had hated her all this while. Ego tried everything she could to take Okonkwo away from Mesoma behind her back, but Okonkwo, being an upright man, never fell for her deceit. So when she heard that Mesoma's in-laws were about to confiscate the properties, she sided with Okudili, that is Okonkwo's younger brother. Any information she got from Mesoma, she went and reported to Okudili in return, so that he could see her worthy to be his wife, as she was a frustrated woman. Mesoma realized that Ego was the reason why all her plans never worked. She regretted ever opening up to Ego and wished that she could take back the hands of time. Ego was busy laughing at her, and before she knew what was happening, they pushed Mesoma into the flowing river that was just beside the property, and she drowned. They were finally happy to get rid of her. Mesoma's children waited all night for their mother's return, but she never showed up. A few days later, a crowd showed up at the house, and they brought with them Mesoma's lifeless body. The realization that Mesoma was dead came as a big shock to her children. This was their biggest nightmare. Okonkwo's brothers acted oblivious about her death, and they pretended to be sad. She was buried a few days later. Then her children were told that since their mother wasn't there anymore, they had no business being in the house. They were ordered to pack all their belongings and move out. Their mother would have fought for them, but she was no longer there. They were too young to fight against their uncles, so they quietly took their things and left to an abandoned building. Okudili and his newly wedded wife, Ego, moved into Okonkwo's house with his brother. The children became wanderers. They wandered all around the village begging for food. Few months after, it rained heavily one night, and Okudili and his wife Ego were sleeping. Then they began having a strange and scary dream. They both dreamt that Mesoma was chasing them with a big cutlass and asked them to confess all they had done to the entire village, else she would keep hunting them. They woke up suddenly from their nightmare and were both scared. They realized that they both had the same dream, and they realized the ghost of Mesoma was really after their life. The next morning, they told Ebuka about their dream, and surprisingly, he also had the same dream. Ego could no longer keep it a secret. She made up her mind to confess, but Okudili and Ebuka asked her to be patient, that they would get everything sorted out. They didn't want to risk being exposed, and they believed that in a matter of time, the nightmares would stop. But it got worse. They started seeing Midsummer's ghost in real life, and this made them start acting out of character. One day, her ghost started chasing them, and they all ran to the town square and began to confess all they had done. The villagers gathered around them and found it hard to believe that they committed all these atrocities just to take over their brother's properties. Immediately after confessing, they slumped and died. They were taken away to be buried. Then Midsummer's maids and servants went out in search of the children and brought them back to the house where they grew up and took over their father's properties. What we can learn from this story is that the heart of man is desperately wicked. Thus, we should be careful of how we tell our businesses to people and our relationship with them, as not everyone may be happy for us. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Please don't forget to give it a big thumbs up, comment, subscribe, and turn on your post notification to get notified when next I post a new video. Bye!